Nigeria and the Netherlands sign Memorandum of Understanding on bilateral consultations.
Vice President Oshibajo commiserates with victims of Katsina flood disaster that killed more than 40 people.
Senate receives supplementary budget from the presidency.
And on Good Morning Nigeria today, we focus on matters arising from the privatization of the power sector in Nigeria.
Yes, Kingsley, in recent times there have been calls for the privatization of the power sector to be revisited or reversed even. This is due to the seeming failure of the power sector, particularly the discos.
Now, of course, the discos refer to the distribution companies. Now, the privatization of the PA that, of course, led to various successor companies such as the GENCOs, that's the power generating companies, and the distribution companies, is one that was aimed as part of the key policy objective of the power sector reforms. Now, the objectives, of course, of privatization were equally to promote efficiency, increase private sector funding of the sector, also accelerate power generation and make the power sector more viable than it had ever been, presumably under private sector management.
The program initiated by the Obasanjo administration, the privatization was restarted in 2010 with the Bureau of Public Enterprises, BPE, midwifing the process under its statutory responsibility.
However, since the completion of the privatization exercise and the handover of the successor companies some 4 years ago, many are saying that the power sector isn't performing optimally.
Yes, they observed that electricity tariffs have been increased 3 times, yet no disco is yet to conclude customer enumeration exercise nor produce meters for its customers.
And there have, of course, been a wide variety of views on the challenges bedeviling the power sector. Now, while many also go back to say that the process that ensured that the companies were privatized was bedeviled, as it were, by unrealistic assumptions, as well as incentives that probably were undeserving. Others are arguing that the distribution companies were not prepared to take on the challenges of the power sector, which, according to some of the analysts, the discos clearly underestimated during the bidding process.
Kingsley, it may not all be bad news, as others are of the view that the privatization process has not been a complete failure, as there have been immeasurable gains, such as increased generation capacity from the pre-privatization levels and increased private sector investment across the value chain.
No doubt about that, Sharon, but of course we all know what the last mile experience has been with regard to the distribution companies, and the questions remain. What are the failures or otherwise the shortcomings of the privatization process that have continued to hobble, for instance, the power sector with regard especially to the distribution chain, and what is required to be done with respect to what happened in the past? It's a review of the power sector act, as it were, necessary, or is a review of the privatization exercise, of course, called for?
So many questions, Kingsley, and these and many other questions we shall be posing to our guests in the course of the program as we beam our searchlight again on the power sector. That's the focus of the program today. Thank you very much for joining us on this midweek edition of Good Morning Nigeria, reaching you live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority, the NTA. I am Sheun Olagunju.
And I'm Kingsley Osadolo. I also welcome you to the program, joining my colleague Sheun in doing so. And as usual, in the course of our presentation, we have our regular complimentary segments and these newspaper review, business, sports, foreign, and others. In the meantime, we have our highlights of the morning news with our other colleague, Joseph Johnson. Morning, Joe.
Morning, Kingsley, and thanks for joining us. A memorandum of understanding on bilateral consultations has been signed between Nigeria and the Kingdom of the Netherlands. State House correspondent Adamu Sambo reports that the highly anticipated deal is part of the major takeaways from the visit by President Muhammadu Buhari to the European nations. The Minister of Foreign Affairs, Geoffrey Onyema, signed for Nigeria, while his Dutch counterpart, Stef Blok, signed for his country. It is aimed at putting existing cooperation and collaboration between the two countries into framework that is more organized and regular for greater socioeconomic benefits. President Muhammadu Buhari has made a strong representation to state parties to support the International Criminal Court with jurisdiction to prosecute cases of grand corruption as greatest evil that destroys efforts at constructive, just and fair governance. Delivering a keynote address at the solemn hearing of the Rome Statute of the Court, the President said an empowered ICC can expand the reach of accountability.
To send a powerful message about the international community's commitment to accountability, a message that will be heard by both victims and perpetrators. These could include serious cases of corruption by state actors that severely compromise the development efforts of countries and throw students into greater poverty. These could also include cases of illicit financial flows where countries are complicit and abstract repatriation of stolen assets. As African Union champion on anti-corruption, these are issues dear to my heart.
And the presidency is reassuring existing and prospective investors in the country of not only the safety and security of their investments, but also huge returns. President Muhammadu Buhari stated these while addressing chief executive officers of Dutch companies as part of his official visit to the Kingdom of the Netherlands.
I'm impressed with our economic relationship. The Dutch companies that are operating in Nigeria, many as they are, I think they have used their experience in dealing with us, and they are handling us with care. We value your investment. We look forward to the new technology, at least to reinforce the huge population we have in the vast land. I assure you a more enabling environment.
Now, the federal government has commiserated with victims of the flood disaster that killed more than 40 people. Vice President Yemi Osinbajo, who visited the scene and the internally displaced persons camps on behalf of the president, said the federal government will collaborate with the state government to relocate people that build on waterways to avoid future occurrence. Adequate relief materials, which include 12 trucks load of food items, would soon be provided for them to meet their daily needs. President Muhammadu Buhari has submitted supplementary budget and environment 2018 to the Senate for consideration. In his communication, the president explained that the funds is to ensure adequate and timely preparations for the 2019 general election and other critical infrastructure needs.
Recently submitted their request. These have been subjected to usual budget evaluation. The aggregate cost of the election is estimated at 242,445,322,600.
The House of Representatives has passed at second reading a bill to establish the Chartered Institute of Public Administration Practitioners in Nigeria. The bill seeks to ensure that disciplinary measures are put in place to curb unprofessional conduct in public administration. Tuesday's plenary also adopted a motion calling on relevant authorities to beef up security in points of Adamawa State as a preventive measure against reprisal attacks which have led to loss of lives and displacement of communities. Finally, the Abuja Light Rail Mass Transit System, which was commissioned on Thursday, 12 July 2018, has fully commenced operation to and fro the Nnamdi Azikiwe International Airport.
Comfortability is there, stress-free, no need to apply my brakes, saving my brake pads and the rest of them. So it's easier, cheaper.
This is a great thing that has come to Nigeria. We have been praying and we are proud of this administration for giving us a way forward, a progress that everybody is. This is the only thing you can do for the masses.
As a frequent traveler, this is very exciting to me to see something of this nature during my time.
And there is government intervention. So that's why we're running it free for now, for people to appreciate it. We are still conducting the fare survey. We have an idea. We want to cross-check it with actuals when people are on the train, and we're getting information very, very soon. We're going to review the pricing policy.
Can't wait to take a ride. I'm sure you feel the same way. That's the news for now. Thanks for watching. I'm Joseph Johnson. Good morning, Nigeria. Continues with Shane and Kinsley after this break. Stay with us.
Unemployment, notably youth unemployment, features strongly in our party's manifesto. We intend to attack the problem frontally through revival of agriculture.
The 30K is going a long way. Actually, I bought an acre of land for 60K like 2012, and presently I have a cassava farm and a yam farm.
Reorganized, trained, and fully equipped, we are the new improved Nigeria Police Force. We fight crime, we bust syndicates. Whatever the crime, wherever the hideout, the Nigeria Police Force will get you busted. Stop kidnapping, armed robbery, murder, pipeline vandalism, and other criminal activities. Be productive. Be security conscious. Join the police force to secure your life and property. This message is from the Nigeria Police Force Public Relations Department.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the daring and invincible Louis the Mosquito. Responsible for 200 malaria cases all on its own. Is there anything that can kill Louis? Morphine! Presenting Morphine Soul Guard. Its powerful formula kills malaria mosquitoes fast. So, get Morphine Power Guard.
These days, people get their news and information from more media sources than ever before. Some of the news and information given are fake, unverified, doctored and manufactured to create confusion, stir disaffection, and cause disunity. Before you believe or share any news, ask yourself, is this real? Is it from a credible source? Is it verified or verifiable? Fake news is dangerous. Whether you do it for fun or for political gains, real people can get hurt. Fake news, don't create it, don't spread it.
This is a public service announcement from NTA.
You in the air-conditioned office with the itchy throat. Strepsils. Girl in the spotlight with the raspy throat. Strepsils. You in the pollution. It's you. Dry throat. Strepsils. Hello in the downpour with the scratchy throat. Take Strepsils. Strepsils, with its soothing medicinal ingredients, will heal the harm done to your throat from external factors. Strepsils! Strepsils! Strepsils, for a dry, itchy, raspy, scratchy throat.
You will not be burning your money again in paying NEPA bills. Thank you very much.
Many people feel they have a responsibility to be irresponsible to those we feel have given them reason to show them irresponsibility.
One day I wonder, give us the services, we will pay you after later. But the government has said, pay us, we will give you services after later.
When we shirk our duties to pay for services like lights, do we make it possible for ourselves to be in the light or to dwell in darkness?
How can they be asking for money when light is unstable?
Code Meter is another mind-blowing and funny episode of your rib-cracking comedy, Professor Jumbo, coming your way this week and laugh like never before.
Over and out.
Brought to you by Glow.
The largest data network, Glow Unlimited.
What makes a Nigerian mom powerful?
I trust the power of Dettol's One Capful for bathing. The power of Dettol's One Capful protects from up to 100 illness-causing germs.
Be 100% sure.
Thank you for staying with us on Good Morning Nigeria. As we go to the financial sector now, the federal government to conduct a national survey on micro, small and medium enterprises sector across some states of the Federation. Details with Comfort Amodu on Business News.
In a bid to assess the impact of government policies and programs in the micro, small and medium enterprises sector in the country, the federal government, through the National Bureau of Statistics, NBS in Sweden, is set to conduct the third edition of the National Survey on MSMEs covering the year 2017. The exercise, which will commence on the 9th of this month in some selected households and enterprises across the country, will also aid designing further solutions and strategies to tackle challenges identified by operators in the sector, as well as ascertain the levels of employment and the sector's contribution to national domestic product. And trading on the equities market closed on a negative note, with the all-share index depreciating by minus 0.81% to close at 36,963.70 basis points in 4,178 deals valued more than 2 billion naira. With Business News, I'm Comfort Amodu.
Thank you very much, Comfort, for the business news on Good Morning Nigeria. Next now, we'll take a look at the front pages of some of today's newspapers.
It's our pleasure to once again welcome Bayo Atoyebi, our newspaper reviewer, who is already here with us in the studio. Thank you, Bayo.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Good morning. Good morning, Kinsley.
Good morning, Nigeria. That's right, Shil.
Let's kick off with the Tribune. The front page is a bit busy. And below the nameplate of the Nigerian Tribune, my wife is being harassed by security operatives. Fayoshe, that's the governor of Ekiti State, with riders as he makes first appearance after Saturday's poll. Ekiti Assembly adjourns sitting till October. And on Dasuki, court serves warrant of release on DSS AGF. Details on page 34. The main headline of the Nigerian Tribune this Wednesday: 2019 elections. FG to spend 242 billion naira. Buhari writes Senate. Riders ask NAS, that's the National Assembly, to transfer funds from inserted projects. Letter may ignite fresh dispute between executive NAS and EU donates £26.5 million to INEC. The details are on page 2. Some stories, places here. Osun APC, Tinubu backs direct primaries as 12 Goba aspirants kick. Reps begin probe of recovered loot assets. Flood destroys 100 houses in Yobe. The floods are ravaging across the country. And protests shut Owerri over deputy governor's impeachment. And then that's the stories on the front page of the Nigerian Tribune.
Let's take a look at the Daily Independent, right from top to bottom. In other words, the headlines from above the nameplate right to the foot of the front page. Workers shot ExxonMobil headquarters for sacking 860 Nigerians. Workers shot ExxonMobil headquarters for sacking 860 Nigerians. Impeachment, that's the kicker. Pro-Madumere protest grounds Owerri. That's on page 5. And the lead story comes with a kicker, 2019. Will deliver free, fair elections, Buhari assures ICC, with 4 riders. Budgets 242.445 billion naira for polls, and declines accent to 4 bills and gives reasons. Appoints Banire and Ngawa chairman of AMCON and Federal Civil Service Commission. And Senate confirms Smith as PSC chairman. PSC stands for Police Service Commission. 2 policemen and 2 bandits die in Kaduna gun battle. That's on page 5. And 12 governorship aspirants reject direct primaries for Osun polls. With a rider, Osun West backs removal of APC chairman and scribe. Second lead story below the photograph there is 2019 again, that's politics. I'll speak on my ambition when it's time, says Saraki. And then lastly, from the front page there, with greater detail on page 2, most discos technically insolvent. That's according to the BPE, Bureau of Public Enterprises. Bayo.
Well, let's talk.
A number of talking points there.
Yes, let's focus on the issue about the letter seeking approval for about 164 billion as supplementary budget. The intent is to help the Independent National Electoral Commission prepare for election. However, the proposal, the budget for the election in 2019 is 242 billion. However, the environment that is being sought by the president was indicated in the letter which the Senate President, which was read at the National Assembly. The President is requesting the legislature to vie the sum of 228 billion from the 578 billion that the National Assembly allegedly inserted in the 2018 appropriation budget. The running cost for the polls for which approval is being sought is to empower INEC, Office of the National Security Advisor, Department of State Security Services, Nigeria Civil and Defense Corps, Police, and Immigration for the purposes of election. Out of the sum, 64.7 billion is also sought to for in critical projects in 2018 budget cut by the National Assembly. The lawmakers had introduced 6,403 projects costing about 578 billion in the 2018 budget. The presidency is sought development so as to not further emburden the budget, which is already heavy, very heavy, and its implementation is difficult. Therefore, by vying the budget, there will be no additional money sought other than that have been approved. What they are seeking, therefore, is to transfer the money from one subhead to the other, and the law requires that it seeks approval from the National Assembly. Meanwhile, the President yesterday called on state parties at The Hague to help the International Criminal Court of Justice in cases of corruption, as illicit financial flows by state actors is becoming a challenge. He said a strong and effective International Criminal Court can send a powerful message on accountability to both victims and perpetrators. President Buhari said this initiative is required so that justice can be seen as a catalyst and which will eliminate corruption by state actors. He also congratulated the International Criminal Court for electing a Nigerian Justice Chike Ebo-Osuji as his president, and he said Nigerians are proud of him.
There's a story we read there on the impeachment notice that's been served by substituted service. Yes, on the deputy governor.
For about 2 weeks now.
Yes, it's been trending. Well, I'm sure that the matters will be resolved eventually from what's going on. But if you look at the alleged grounds of misconduct for which the deputy governor is now facing impeachment, these are some of the issues. I mean, we saw what happened in Enugu.
Yes.
If you recall, Onyebuchi, I believe that's his name, Sunday Onyebuchi. He was accused of running a poultry in government house and so on and so forth. But eventually he went to court, and then the court nullified the impeachment. So why go through all of this process when some of those grounds appear to be, I mean, on the face of it, somewhat questionable or unsustainable? Because you have a lot of tension, of course, being generated now in the state.
Unfortunately, the definition of misconduct is placed at the doorstep of the legislature when it comes to issues of impeachment. And therefore, we have to suffer going through all the gamut of going through the court processes to see whether actually those alleged misconduct were actually misconduct.
I agree with you, but judicial activism will also ensure that it isn't just reduced, as it were, to the capricious demands of the legislature. Oh, you didn't greet the governor. Oh, the governor sent you on an errand or sent you to represent him. You didn't need to represent him. Yes. You say he has not been participating, for instance, in executive council meetings and so on and so forth. Some deputy governors, I mean, when usually the relationship is going sour, they don't get the allocation to run their offices. So it must be quid pro quo. I mean, if you don't have the funds to run your office, why would you expect him to perform his functions?
Well, a solution possibly is that a clear-cut definition for rules for the vice president, deputy governors must be made so as to eliminate this kind of conflict.
All right, bye.
I think the baseline is just that they've both falling out. That's just the baseline.
That's right.
The authority.
Yeah, let's take a look at the authority. The list story is also on the proposed supplementary allocation for the conduct of the 2019 election. That's the lead story. But above the nameplate, you have 4 headlines. Let's take 3 of them. Shine PIGB, that's the Petroleum Industry Governance Bill. Northern stakeholders tell Buhari, that's on page 4. And banks to provide court order to assess customers' BVN. And lastly, Fashola distorting issues in power sector. This according to the discourse. Details of that story can be found on page 13. And of course, the scoreboard there has to do with the inability of discourse to offtake at least 2,000 megawatts of power that is generated. So the discourse responding to the substance of the press conference addressed by the Prime Minister sometime last week. Now, let's come right to the foot of the front page of the Authority newspaper. Tension in Imo over bid to pass ranching bill. That's on page 3. And then you have the reps, Summon, Malami, Magu, and Emefiele over recovered $2 trillion loot, page 6.
Yeah, the blueprint, before we come back to you, Bayo, and below the nameplate of the new blueprint, 2019, Dankwambo, Amechi, Shehu Sani differ on how Nigerians should vote. Man 40 kills 65-year-old mother in Oshun. That's a sad one there. And the one we've been talking about here, Imo Deputy Governor's impeachment done deals, who says the Speaker of the State. The main headline on the front page of the blueprint, at Blueprint Impact Series Awards, Nigerians yearn for improved security. Has a number of riders there. Time for state police is now. Emir of Gwari. Can wants 10,000 placement with VIP's banks withdrawn. No security without inclusive governance. Dan Kwambo, that's the governor of Gombe State. And we've set up more security outfits, so says the federal government. And then Buhari withholds assent to agri-credit bill. 3 others, that's below the picture story on the front page of the blueprint. Dasuki, court sells release warrant on DSS AGF. Ex-governor Kalu rearranged on 39-count charge. Flood sweeps away 6-year-old pupil in Edo. 2 cops, 2 bandits killed in Gwari ambush. Bayo, this flood issue
yes, yes.
sweeping across the country.
Yes, sadly, in Benin City, a schoolboy was swept away by a flood. In fact, it led to protesters blocking the busy Uselu-Lagos road, agitating that something must be done to find the body of the boy. The boy was going home with the mother after school, and as they were walking along, the boy slipped into the drainage and they couldn't recover her. Governor Obaseki has already condoled with the family, and they are trying to do what they can to recover the body. But meanwhile, the death toll in Jibia, the flood in Katsina State, has increased to 52. The vice president yesterday was in a shuttle visit to Katsina as well as Sokoto, all related to flood. The nation also reports about flood at other locations. A town is called Babangida in Yobe State. There, 100 houses were flooded and inundated by rains. However, Providence had it, no lives were lost. Also in Abeokuta, over the weekend, a massive flood held the city to ransom. Many commuters were stranded. I know of a person who was in his car from about 8 o'clock. He didn't get home until midnight because of flood. Many of them are factors of drainages and massive construction that is going on.
The Meteorological Agency warned at the beginning of the year that the rains are going to cause havoc, and that we needed to be prepared for this.
So most states, particularly state capitals, particularly where there's been massive construction to improve the city, drainages must be left open so that when these heavy rains come, they will have their passage rather than look for homes.
Yes. Course.
Yes.
Yeah, but in addition to that, this is what in law you refer to as an act of God. When it rains like this, but the response is also critical. Now, what is the level of our readiness to respond to emergencies arising from flooding? And I think that's very critical. You have to have inflatable boats, and then you have to have persons who are also trained, in rescuing persons who are stranded in flood waters or otherwise. We have seen what has happened in Japan this year. More than 100 persons have been killed. And Japan, of course, is an advanced country. So, what is the response that is crucial? But I think so.
Yeah, I agree with you, because NIMET has been warning that the floods are coming and the rains are going to be heavier. And therefore, it is not only coastal cities or riverine cities that should be thinking of the inflatable boats you are thinking of. It can happen anywhere. So yes.
That's right. All right, Bayo, let's take a look at to this editorial, which is from the Blueprint newspaper, and it's at page 12, and it's on Order 6 and the anti-graft war.
Yeah, there have been divergent views on this.
Yes, there have been divergent views. But before I go to that, let me quickly give you one of these fallout from the last World Cup. President of Venezuela, Nicolas Maduro, says Africa, not France, won the World Cup. He says that African immigrants that have arrived in France, that have been assimilated by the policy of that country as assimilation, have done France their proud. He says African team of the France team of 23 players had 16 Africans. He said Africa that has been despised are the sons of Africa were the one that won the World Cup for France. Now, talking about Order 6. Order 6 has become controversial. Only yesterday, over the weekend, the Minister of Information stated categorically that the presidential order is not strange to even Nigerian political terrain. The President Shehu Shagari issued executive order. President Olusegun Obasanjo issued executive order. Acting Vice President Yemi Osinbajo, while acting as president when President Muhammadu Buhari was away, issued executive order. However, the controversy about Executive Order 6 is specifically about Section 2 of that order. And some argue that it tends to assume that an accused is guilty unless he can prove himself to be innocent, which is actually turning our jurisprudence on its head. And that has been the challenge. But the intent of that order is to ensure that initiatives to hide stolen assets are frustrated. So an executive order is not a law. It is subject to challenge. It can be challenged in a court of law. And whatever the courts will become the order of the. But the intent is to further strengthen the fight against corruption.
Well, that's right. But we've discussed this subject on Good Morning Nigeria. And what has emerged is perhaps there's a misconstruction of the whole idea of Order 6. I mean, those who were involved in helping to draft it, we've had at least one of them on the program. It is not to usurp the powers of either the legislature or the judiciary, but to enable the president, this time, give orders more readily to the various agencies that are involved in the anti-corruption fight. EFCC, for instance, ICPC. Some others have also argued that perhaps it is superfluous, but it is to say, look, these are directive principles, and that you must at all times have recourse to extant laws and the provisions of the Constitution. That's right.
That is the intendment.
That's
but
right.
the fear is expressed about the possibility of usurping the powers of the legislature and the judiciary, and those must be allayed.
That's right. Bayo, I'd like to thank you for being around today.
Thank you
Midweek,
too.
of course, we'll see you again tomorrow. It's Good Morning Nigeria. We'll take a short break now, and when we return, we'll be dealing with privatization of the power sector and matters arising.
Hate speech is not a joke. It incites genocide and crimes against humanity. Most of Africa's civil wars are caused by hate speech from one tribe against another. We don't want it here. The Nigerian government stands firm against hate speech.
Under no conditions whatsoever should we tolerate or excuse or justify hate speech or hateful conduct of any kind, especially where such is illegal.
There is no doubt that the resurgent push for separatism, as well as the rising cases of ethnic and religious disharmony, are all traceable to the growing phenomenon of hate speech.
One nation bound in freedom, peace and unity.
Nigeria, one nation, one people.
This is a public service announcement brought to you by NTA.
Your favorite Maggi star now wears a new look. Its great taste and quality still remain the same. With Maggi, every woman is a star.
Whenever pain occurs, you want quick relief. Try new Nurofen Express. It goes to the source of pain and gets to work in under 15 minutes. That's why Nurofen Express delivers fast and effective relief. New Nurofen Express works at the source of pain. Fast.
Being a mom is great, but when your child has a fever, you don't know what to do. I trust Nurofen for Children to take care of my child's pain and fever.
Effective relief you can trust. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the daring and invincible Louis the Mosquito. Responsible for 200 malaria cases all on its own. Is there anything that can kill Louis? Morphine! Presenting Mortise Power Guard. Its powerful formula kills malaria mosquitoes fast. So, get Mortise Power Guard.
You in the air-conditioned office with the itchy throat. Strepsils. Girl in the spotlight with the raspy throat. Strepsils. You in the pollution. It's you. Dry throat. Strepsils. Hello in the downpour with the scratchy throat. Take Strepsils. Strepsils, with its soothing medicinal ingredients, will heal the harm done to your throat from external factors. Strepsils! Strepsils! Strepsils, for a dry, itchy, raspy, scratchy throat.
Winning in hot and dry conditions is hard. Causes the body to sweat, which attracts germs that are easily passed from one person to another. What keeps you so cool, man? Dettol Cool combines Dettol's protection and an invincible icy feel. For super cool confidence, use Dettol Cool.
Dettol soap is now also available for 100 Naira only.
The NTA Television College Jos admission forms for diploma program in film and television production, television engineering technology, broadcast journalism, and degree programs in mass communication, television journalism, and mass communication television production is now on sale. The sale of forms will commence 14th May and run to 13th August 2018 at the cost of 7,500 Naira only per form, payable through the remitter platform in favor of NTA Television College Jos. Forms can be obtained from all all marketing offices in NTA State Capital Stations, zonal centers, Training Directorate of the NTA Headquarters Abuja, and the Office of the Academic Secretary of the NTA Television College. Applicants are required to possess 5 credits in GCE, SSCE in relevant areas of study, including English and mathematics, in not more than 2 sittings. All completed forms attached with photocopies of credentials must be submitted on or before the 13th of August 2018 to the stations where the forms were obtained. For further inquiries, please contact the Office of the Academic Secretary on these numbers. Announcer, Registrar.
Fake news which is shared for malicious purposes is a danger to our peace and security in Nigeria. Misinformation as fake news is a serious threat to our hard-earned democracy and promotes hatred and misunderstanding between our communities. We are all responsible for stopping the spread of fake news in its tracks. So, always check the source and credibility of any news item. Say no to fake news. This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information.
Right, you're welcome back. But if you just joined us, it's Good Morning Nigeria. We are reaching you live on the network service of Africa's largest television network, the Nigerian Television Authority. Now, to kickstart our conversation on the nagging issues with regard to the privatization of the power sector, let's take this report by our correspondent Aisha Ubali.
The National Electric Power Policy of 2001 and the Electric Power Sector Reform Act of 2005 constitute the framework under which power reforms in Nigeria were mandated. The process includes the dissolution of the National Electric Power Authority (NEPA), the creation of the Power Holding Company of Nigeria (PHCN) as an initial holding company, also the creation of 18 successor companies. The privatization of PHCN successor companies, consisting of generating companies called GENCOs and distribution companies, DISCOs, was a key plan for the power sector reform in Nigeria. A process initiated by the then Obasanjo administration in 2010, with the Bureau of Public Enterprise spearheading the process under its statutory responsibility, had an objective to promote efficiency, increase private sector funding of the power sector, increase power generation, and make the power sector more viable under the private sector management. 4 years after the sale of the Power Holding Company of Nigeria, many Nigerians believe the process has come with numerous challenges. Recently, the National Assembly, among many other colours, have suggested that the whole process be revisited upon debating the privatization and seeming failure of the power sector, particularly the DISCOs. Observers have argued that the process was flawed from the onset, while others argue that the process was very transparent and monitored by international bodies such as the World Bank and others. Still, there is this argument that the privatization of power sector has not met the desired expectations of consumers. Some factors that observers say have contributed to the failure of the process from working optimally. Some factors that observers say have contributed to the failure of the process from working optimally include the laying off of the key drivers of the process, absence of core investors, ineffective government representation on the board of privatized companies, as well as operational and regulatory issues beyond DISCO's and GENCO's control, among others. The question now are, what can be done to make the process work optimally? Is reversal the best option? What are the authorities doing to ensure that all partners are carried along? These and more questions will be answered shortly by our guest on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you very much, Aisha Ubal Ali, for that background report. Indeed, we have the guests already here with us in the studios, plus one guest will be joining us via Skype from outside the country. First, at this time, we'd like to welcome Engineer Olabode Showumi. He's a consultant to the House of Representatives Committee on Power. Engineer Showumi, pleasure to have you on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All right. Also here with us in the studios is Mr. Yunana Malo. Yunana Malo is Director of Energy, Bureau of Public Enterprises. That's the BPE that superintended the privatization of successor companies to PHCN. Mr. Malo, pleasure that you are here with us in the studios.
Thank you for having me. Good morning, Nigeria.
And also with us in the studio, Dr. Sam Amadi. He is the former chairman of the Nigerian Electricity Regulatory Commission, NERC. Thank you very much for joining us, Dr. Amadi.
Thank you.
Good to see you. And also joining us from Skype from South Africa, via Skype from South Africa, is Dr. Joy Ogaji. She is the Executive Secretary of the Association of Power Generation Companies. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. We appreciate your joining us on Good Morning Nigeria this morning.
All right, thanks. Ogaji is usually based in Nigeria.
We've had assignment.
That's right. We've had that as a guest on Good Morning Nigeria sometime in the past. But let's begin. I'm sure all Nigerians are familiar with the story of the power sector. But what is unclear is what the dynamics are that continue to bedevil, as it were, the smooth operation or the optimal operation of the electricity power sector. There was a presumption that once you got the privatization exercise right and then you freed it from government bureaucracy, things will begin to see an escalation, as it were, in improved services. But what we do get to know, particularly for the end consumers, lingering issues, power supply remains poor, metering is unavailable, people are still buying their own transformers. The old complaints, some persons are even saying, look, NEPA was even better before all these, some of these discos came along and so on and so forth. So we have also heard that people are saying, listen, there was something fundamentally flawed with the privatization exercise. So reverse the entire process or revise it altogether. These are the issues, of course, we expect you to touch on. Let's begin with the BPE. That's the Unana Malo, your enterprise, your bureau supervised the privatization exercise. And indeed, there was supposed to be post-privatization evaluation. What is it that the BPE has found out post-privatization of the power sector?
Well, thank you very much for this question. Now, I think for us to appreciate what is going on, we have to look back a little and know where we're coming from so that we know exactly where we're heading to. Before the reform and privatization program took place, Nigeria had gone through a period of over 30 years without investments in the power sector. And the infrastructure had deteriorated to the level that it required huge interventions. It became very clear that government alone could not shoulder such a responsibility. This idea was captured in the policy that was approved by government in 2001 and subsequently translated into the Act in 2005. It was all agreed that the private sector would be in a better position to muster the resources that will lead to, better investments and therefore revitalization of the power sector. And we commenced the process of the reform and eventually the privatization. I want us to understand that power has often been treated as a social service in this country. And we decided at a point that we will move away from keeping it as a social service to a commercial commodity. And through that process, we decided to do what other countries had done. And with the help of a steering committee and various experts, we had agreed that the best way to go was to segment activities within the sector. Those who are very good in policy should do policy. Those who know how to generate power should do generation. And there should be a transmission company. And then there should be those who will be in charge of selling the power, trading the power out. Understanding this value chain is also very critical in understanding the problem in the power sector. And we did that by also bringing in independent regulators that will make sure that the consumer is not cheated, because we still need the social aspect embedded in the new model. And the regulator will also ensure that the investor is able to make a normal return. So with this kind of setting, we had a bulk trader who was able to buy power from those who generate power and then sell to the distribution companies, with the transmission company making sure that the power leaves the GENCOs to the DISCOs. Now, with all this arrangement, there was the understanding that it will work smoothly by ensuring that the whole value chain is improved upon over a period of time. While generation was going on, transmission was also expanding, and the DISCOs were also investing. And therefore, we'll have, at the same time, growth in all segments of the value chain. we borrowed from the New Delhi model that had actually done a similar work, and we were supposed to move in a direction that would bring the much needed investments. But along the way, there were hiccups. Let me put it in a very clear terms. You will get the picture. My DG yesterday said we worked on the power sector, as it were, like a very major surgery. And then we were able to identify the problem. We stitched the person together, left him on the operation bed, and all of us were expecting him to just wake up and continue on his own. It requires a lot of nurturing, which eventually will have allowed the person to come back and contribute to society. But unfortunately, the power sector, I think at a point, we didn't do the correct nurturing, and that is why we have the kind of problem.
What is it that
what nurturing should we have done?
Well, that is a very good question.
What kind of feeding bottle were we supposed to buy that we didn't buy?
That's a very good question, because you have to understand that government had responsibility, the investors had responsibility, the regulator had responsibility, and everybody was supposed to work towards a particular goal. Now, if you have a situation where the responsibility of government was not completely executed, then there will be a problem. Where you have the investors also not completely doing their own part, there will be a problem. The same thing with the regulator and all other players. And therefore, here and there have been hitches. And what we have today is like everybody is blaming the other person. I think there is enough blame to share, like the Minister of Power said recently. What we need to do is to find how we can nurture that patient that has been on the surgery bed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Malo. Dr. Amadi, there were high expectations. I'm going to stick with that. This privatization of the power sector, there were high expectations about what would happen once the power sector is privatized. But our expectations seem to be dashed, if I can say that. How can you assess that sector and the privatization process?
Thank you. I think first, you probably made the first fundamental point, expectation. As I think perhaps there is a over expectation. That's number one. And I also blame the policymakers, because we've forgotten that the reform of the electric sector is not about privatization alone, but they went to town with privatization. Even when I was in office, I've always had my doubts about privatization. And I put that in a book very clearly in 2009 before I became NEC chairman. And so the point, like he said, the narrative he gave about why we privatize or why we reform is correct. Okay, the assumption that the problem was first low investment, and because government, as you know, all over the world perhaps may not be able to invest in all the social services sector. Two was the sense that public ownership also created a sense of inefficiency. So the idea was put those who have the money and therefore have the interest to run things efficiently in charge. The question therefore is, what failed? Now I have two views. One is that arguably to privatize was the right thing. Two is how he did it is also matter. So the how, there are problems. I think we should start owning up to some failure in the how, even if we are adamant that it was a good policy. The why is okay. And what's the things that failed? People talk about the sequencing. When I was in power in office, I did an interview that the Minister of Power got all the people in Minister of Power and BPA, and they said I should be thrown away, because I said that all over the world it's difficult to do privatization well. It's unknown. It requires a mix of institutions to work and align together to get it to work. So how? Sequencing. I think it was wrong. It was more like a religion that we determined to sell all the assets, both generation and distribution, at the same time. I understand the theory. The idea was shock to therapy. If you put everything together so that you don't have reform lethargy, people will not pull back. But the problem was that it's like when we say the classical burning your candle at both ends. So we sold generation, we sold distribution. Now the assumption is that everybody coming they all come with sufficient funding and sufficient technical capacity to fix things at the same time. Now, Chile, in many other places, Argentina, some of them had both public and private competing. So, for example, some discos perhaps could have done well. Maybe Eko, Ikeja, and a few other places. You take time and look for very qualitative bidders. So I'm not blaming BPE, I'm blaming this whole policy setup. Two, by the time we privatized, by the way, we didn't even have, there was no account of any of the discos that have been audited until 2012 when when under my regime, we initiated it with BPE helping us, that had the first set of audited accounts. So these are companies that have not been audited for perhaps decades.
You know, which companies are that? Is the
all the discos, all the NEPA, the so-called
no,
NEPA.
where the discos are new companies.
Yes,
NEPA successor
PACN,
companies to NEPA.
all of them, including the generation, distribution, transmission, no one had an audited account. And when I spoke with Oyembalokwe, who was then head of engineering, ECN then, he said they never had any. So the point is this: we need to build some integrity process, some structural corporate governance. That's why the reform talked about corporatization. The phasing was first unbundling, power holding. We did that. Corporatize and commercialize, then privatize. My argument is that we did not deal with the corporatizing. And what have two things have happened? One, you would have improved the performance of those discos. You would have created legibility on data, where things are. People knew these companies have a footprint of some sense of corporate management. That would have allowed better investors come in. Those who have also footprint of turnaround. In Delhi, if you look at the Delhi example in Delhi, they had teaching problem, but they came over it quicker because Delhi, don't forget, India has state-based regulatory structure. Their own market was a little bit different. So the point I'm trying to bring up first is this. The how had an issue. We learn, hindsight is 40-40, we learn from errors. Perhaps we should have been more graduated, more gradual, and that would have attracted more investors. Secondly, he makes a point about regulation, which is important. Perhaps Nigerians are also in a hurry. That's the point he's trying to make. It is easy to say, oh, discos are corrupt, but the regulator has to build data. It takes time to build the data. So, for example, when I was in NEC, we sent out auditors, snap audit, and we discovered that the discos were using money to make inappropriate investments. So some of them are perhaps more than they ought to, some of them are given to their companies. And NEC issued some report and fined them. Recently, NEC also has fined some. So there will be some capacity building in the regulators and others to be able to match the asymmetry of information. These guys have the information. You need to find a way to get them. So the point I'm trying to make, therefore, is that perhaps the privatization happened when we've not built the capacity. And now we are learning in the crisis, building capacity as this happens, and so it takes some time lag before the capacity to freely see through, as it were, the dark coven of operations of the discos. Thirdly, what's happening here is, I think that perhaps the network is also too broad to be efficiently managed. So don't forget how these discos were divided and GENCOs. We looked at proximate operational field of the old NEPA. So some discos cover 6 states, 1 or 2 of them, others 5 states. If you look at other places, the discos are more like perhaps a state. Abuja could have a disco. So perhaps there's come to a time when there should be an in-depth regulatory study, analysis, and say, okay, next phase, what do we do? So I think that we shouldn't get stuck on what happened in 2013. We should move on to say, this is the lesson, this is what we feel, these are the shortcomings. What does it tell us about the whole structure of this reform? I'm not in support of saying, oh, cancel privatization, but I'm in support of using the regulator to now benchmark performance and then assess the discos. And if they can't cover their field efficiently, you take some part of it through a regulated process, not policy from Minister of Power. You take it through a due process, hearing, evidence-based, and then you say, look, you can't manage this network. You ship it off and give it through a competitive process to somebody who can manage it. So I think there's something really bad or really problematic about the process. And I think we live in denial if we say, oh, there's no time. There's enough time now to see some bigger improvement, and we don't have it.
Dr. Amadi, that's a broad assessment, and we do appreciate that. I'll go to Engineer Showumi now. We would like to hear your assessment of this privatization of the power sector.
Okay, thank you. I think, first of all, certain things I want to say as a benchmark and as a background. Okay. In the details of the privatization itself, the companies that won the bid were not given on the basis of the companies who had the biggest bid, but the ones that had the best business plan, actually, for improvement of the inefficiencies in the system. And the inefficiencies were summed up in what is called the ATC&C losses, meaning aggregate technical, collection, and commercial loss. Technical losses in terms of the infrastructural inefficiencies, commercial losses in terms of the value of the production of the service vis-a-vis the selling of the same service, and collection losses in the sense that even the services that were rendered, there was an inability to actually recover it. Now, one of the things that I would have expected to be hammered upon is the fact that the people that won these bids were supposed to be measured in terms of the business plan that they submitted themselves. Now, it's very easy to look at policy issues, very easy to look at what had happened in the past, to look at inefficiencies in government, but that's also a defeatist attitude. The fact is that there are these people that are on ground. Every entrepreneur in this world knows that when you get on ground, no matter how brilliant your business plan is, what you find on ground sometimes has a shift from what is written. And as such, it is the entrepreneurial spirit that overcomes the inefficiencies of the system, and that is why entrepreneurs are in high demand anywhere in this world. So there is an issue that is incumbent on everybody that is responsible for policy, responsible for some amount of regulation, to ensure that what they promised at the point of purchase, at the point of privatization, they should be held accountable to it. And nobody has really looked at that, because it's in that is where the tire touches the road. That is where the connection is to the reality that is on ground, and that is where there can be sincere improvement. It is when those things are looked upon that we can now be talking in real terms what can be done to improve the system. We must not forget that we can talk about hindsight. Yes, it's 2020 vision. We can talk about what could be. That is the future. But we can still miss it in both in hindsight and what can be done in the future, if certain basic things, which include ensuring that people are held accountable to their investment promises, people are held accountable to governance and practices, people are held accountable to basic best practices to ensure that the system works, to ensure that the industry meets the needs that it wants, and to ensure that the man on the street is a bit knowledgeable to ask the right questions. Because one of the things that is fundamentally missing, even with Nigerians, is the inability to ask the right questions. It is not just enough to say where is power. It is important to ask about the process in which power comes about, and what are the bottlenecks, and who are responsible for ensuring that those bottlenecks exist, and how Nigerians can ensure that that becomes a thing of the past.
Well, Engineer Showman, thank you very much. But what do we know now about the gap between the promises by the purchasers of the privatized entities and what they are delivering?
Well, I mean, some of the information really, it's between them and the regulator and those who oversight them. But in terms of the general issues, at the point of purchase, based on the business plan that they submitted, they were required to make certain investments. One area was metering. It is obvious that that has not been done. They were required to make certain investments in the area of distribution networks. It is obvious that those things have not been done. So there should be somebody who will say, hey, this is what you promised us at the inception. Why is this not been done? And if this had not been done, what are the issues? Is it liquidity issues, which everybody knows is an issue? If liquidity is an issue, then maybe there should be a round table to look at it. If you cannot get people to invest, what are the factors? Those factors should involve government investing in it. And even if government invests and they are still not able to get people, should they dilute their ownership to ensure other people bring in forth? I mean, there are a lot of options that can come in. You understand? It is not enough to talk about eradicating the whole privatization exercise itself. Neither is it to say that we should. But the fact is that people are on ground working. Are they doing what they should be doing? Are they responsible to the basics of what they should be doing. I mean, those are
Dr.
things that...
Gaji would have to, Dr. Gaji, who is joining us via Skype in South Africa, you need to talk to that. You are part of the generation companies. In fact, you are a face of the generation companies because of your association. Have you guys been living up to your promises during the privatization, especially generation?
Good morning, everyone, and Nigerians for tuning in to this very important discussion. I'm glad that BP is represented in the studio, so also the lawmaker, as well as the former chairman of NEC representing the regulator. So whatever I would say will be balanced, and they will acclaim or maybe affirm to what I would say. The privatization, as it has been elaborately discussed, both the distribution and the generation sector handed over to 1st of November 2013. And we are approaching 5 years after the privatization. I think BP is there to confirm the progress so far made by generation companies. Each of them were given in their business plan as well as in their performance agreements capacities to recover according to their megawatt requirements and the area they are located. I stand here to make bold to say that most of the generation companies have met
Dr. Joy Ogaji, we apologize. We hope that we're able to clear that. There is a freeze from your end. Can you hear me? If you can hear me, perhaps you just continue with what you were saying.
I can hear you, sir. I can hear you, sir. Can you hear me?
We can hear you loud and clear. Continue now.
Saying BP is there to confirm, and Dr. Amadi, the former regulator, before he left, he can also confirm that both NEC and BP has no case on the generation companies. The reason being that they have met and some of them have exceeded the terms of their contract and their licensing terms. Generation companies are not the ones holding back the power sector. They have exceeded in spite of lack of payment. As you're very much aware, generation companies are owed over $1 trillion. In spite of that, they are still generating. And a lot of investors are questioning and asking me, Joy, how are they managing? I said it's patriotism. They don't want to see their country disappointed in the eyes of the international community. That is just the only answer. Otherwise, no businessman can continue with a debt of over $1 trillion and you're still generating. So that will be my answer to that question if you heard me clearly. I'm very sorry for the poor network over here.
Let's clear this. Owing by who? Who is owing who? Because a lot of people don't know about this. So you let us know about this. And how does the owing come about?
Sorry, can you take your question again? I didn't hear the who.
You said that the generators are being owed. You said the generators are being owed over $1 trillion. That's in naira, I assume. And then being owed by who?
Okay, that's a very good question, ma. Thank you for that question. Now, the way the power sector is designed is prior to the privatization time, it was discovered that companies are not so efficient, looking at their past history from the PAP. And so in order to boost the government introduced an agency called the Bulk Electricity Trading Company of Nigeria, NBET. So NBET is the bulk buyer. He buys from the GENCOs and sells to the DISCOs. So contractually, I would say that who is owing me, who owing the GENCOs this so much money is NBET and the federal government.
All right, Joy Ogaji, thank you very much. We'll still keep you on the program, and we do hope that the network will be much sharper when we return to you. But just try and listen into the comments of the other guests. Dr. Sam Amadi, you wanted to respond to some of the issues that have been thrown up, especially by Engineer Showme with regard to the observable gaps in the business plans of the discos, for instance, and what their performance has been.
I mean, the points you make, they're very well made, and but it's like the case of watching football and actually playing the football. It's true, like BP Comfort, there are some of these obligations, it's theoretical also. Somebody undertakes to provide, meter all the customers in his network in 3 years. By the way, he doesn't know the customer base before he took over. So he has given you a 3-year plan to meter everybody. And he now discovers that metering probably had X, and now has X times 2. That's 1. 2, the pricing, the revenue flow, metering is not going to happen. It's not a ghost. It's not something like, this is not sorcery. Somebody has to make investment, procure meter, there are project management side of it, and then you meter people. So I give you a practical example. That's why I said I come from experience on this. When we did the 2012 tariff, I insisted that tariff cannot be signed until they benchmark metering to 18 months. I fought with the ministry, they refused. Finally, I delayed signing until it was done. Now, watch it. We said within 18 months, they all undertook that they're going to meter all their customers. 8 months after, I called a meeting because the report shows that there's no metering going on. They haven't done much. Why not metering? They told me. Their wage bill, for example, Abuja Disco, was then 400 million. The federal government, like Fela will say, they come introduce second tier, everything teared to pieces. The federal government now said you must pay 50% improvement of salaries for workers as part of dislodging them for privatization. And that raised their bill to 800 million. So it was clear that nobody could execute those obligations. When I came with cap me. Now the point I'm trying to make is that these obligations, these commitments they make, are commitments that a regulator will look at the real market. For example, gas supply, generation, you predicted in the tariff, the recovery tariffs, are they going as prepared? If there's a gap, the regulator comes back and redesigns. That's why you have a regulator. So what I'm saying is this. BPE had a commitment with these people, and NEC was part of it. But these commitments, these discos cannot execute them in the condition. Primarily their own fault, some of them are inefficient, and the regulator has to stamp their feet. Also, secondarily, because circumstances that were projected are no longer there. If, for example, as some of them claim, and I want to be fair to them, some of them are claiming that maybe they're owed billions of naira by MDA, some of them, and military and other public sector debts. If, for example, because of social balancing in tariff, the regulator doesn't allow you to collect everything you ought to collect, which makes sense, fairness, because the customers don't have good service, no metering. So why are you going to raise the tariff? All these things will build to a scenario where you don't expect that they will execute all those obligations. So the point I'm trying to make, therefore, is 3 points. 1, it's possible that the people who have this network don't have the capacity to do the kind of heavy lifting that we expect, massive investment, endure losses for 2-3 years, and then perhaps things improve dramatically and you get there. What do? 2, they may not even have the technical capacity enough to manage at the level we expect. And thirdly, very important, there are certain things we need to fix for them to effectively deliver. So the blame is two-sided. One is, these guys are not doing well, so we can push them, we can kick butts, they move faster. The other blame is that perhaps we have made an assumption about this market that is not working. And I tell you one assumption. When I came in 2010, 2011, we had the Bamidele Tuturu metering panel. They went on the country, and we established then about 40 to 50% metering gap. That's huge. In a market that is insolvent, where many people are not paying bills, where power generation and distribution is faltering, you don't expect to raise that level of revenue to close that 40% or 50% gap in 2-3 years. So there must be 2 things happening. Either some level of social investment on metering, which this government is planning. Either you now create a process of where customers themselves, some kind of crowdsourcing, people bring in funding, like we did with CapMe, which I think was a great idea, which was discontinued, which means people, if you create a process, people meter themselves and then find some kind of deduction down the line. So the point I'm trying to raise, therefore, is certain part of this market cannot be cured with the private electricity market as it's designed now. So I'm raising a design problem. Some people are raising issue, it must be a failure of regulator or a failure of DISCO. It could be a failure of design. And most projects, like Nigeria is here, fail at design. If you look at Chile, look at other parts of the world, you discover that some people privatize when they have achieved sufficiency in generation. So the privatization was to gain efficiency in delivery. Nigeria is looking at 3,000 to 4,000 megawatts. That's really too low for a private electricity market to thrive. And that's why the idea of NIPP was a great idea. And when I was in NEC, we said that NIPP should not collect profitable revenue, that NIPP's assets should be devalued as a form of social investment. Now, if NIPP did well and brought all their 5,000 megawatts in the first phase and started the second phase, you'd have had 10,000 megawatts from NIPP by now, by design. Add to the existing maybe 6,000 capacity. If you're talking about 16,000 megawatts market, it makes more sense. So when people are getting more power, they're ready to pay more. You can increase tariff. This market is so difficult to be fair for both the policymaker, for both the regulator and operator. And the consumer is worse. So what I'm arguing is that it is time now to stop this blame game and sit back and say, we got some things fundamentally wrong about this market. The assumption that the private sector will solve most of this problem is not true. By the way, Nigerian private sector is as inefficient as Nigerian government, or more so. So the assumption that it wants to take out government, I'm not a supporter of that. There are certain things government ought to do and do more efficiently.
And we're going to be talking about those things that government needs to do. But at this time, we'll take a short break. We'll be back to continue this discussion.
Brought us as usual.
As usual. You have no problem.
For the three people.
You are welcome, sir.
As usual, yeah?
You take that one. You take that one. You don't understand? We want Nigerian homegrown rice. Finish. You don't have? You don't have?
Join the rice revolution today.
No other rice that tastes like Nigerian rice. Are you sorry? That's the Nigerian rice we are talking about. Chocolate made in Nigerian rice. Healthy food. I'm going to bring Mrs. to come to chocolate rice of made in Nigeria here. And see how it are made. Correct. And how they are cook it. Correct. Homegrown rice are good for your health. It boosts our economy and give employment to our people.
This message is brought to you by the Federal Ministry of Information.
You in the air-conditioned office with the itchy throat. Strepsils. Girl in the spotlight with the raspy throat. Strepsils. You in the pollution. Yes, you. Dry throat. Strepsils. Hello in the downpour with the scratchy throat. Take Strepsils.
Strepsils, with its soothing medicinal ingredients, will heal the harm done to your throat from external factors.
Strepsils. Strepsils.
Strepsils, for a dry, itchy, raspy, scratchy throat.
Helen! Your kitchen gets 10 out of 10. Thank you. This also gets a 10. Should we see the toilet now? Sure. This gets just 1. It is clean. But not perfect 10. Better than my detergent and bleach? Impossible. Challenge? Try the new Apic 10X.
Compared to bleach and detergent, Apic sticker formulation removes yellow stains times better, giving you a sparkling clean toilet.
Wow.
Now you also take that?
Apic 10X challenge.
Also available in 200 ml pack.
The Nigerian broadcast sector is evolving. Operators, including cameramen and photographers, require new skills and techniques to churn out world-class productions. A unique opportunity is open to all. NTA TV College Jos is organizing a 4-week intensive short course in camera operation techniques aimed at enhancing the professional skills of cameramen and photographers, practicing and freshers. Date 16th July to 10th August 2018. Another 4-week intensive short course in photojournalism and photography holds 13th August to 7th September 2018. Venue for both courses is the TV College premises, NTA TV College, Rayfield, Jos. Fee 100,000 naira per participant. Accommodation inclusive. For more inquiries, contact us on 0806 980 9807 and 0703 660 7155. TV College, Jos. Training you to be the best you want.
All right, welcome back. And it's still Good Morning Nigeria. We still have all our guests. Dr. Joy Ogaji with us still via Skype from South Africa. Dr. Sam Amadi right here with us in the studios. And Yunana Malo, Director of Energy, BP, is still here as well as a consultant to the House Committee on Power. That's Engineer Olabode Showumi. The BPE. I mean, a number of issues have come up, and it would appear that this is not just a crisis situation, but we're in the thicket, as it were. So, how does the BPE evaluate, the mess that the power sector is in at the moment? For that is what exactly it is.
Indeed, we have a problem, and I don't think the right thing to do is to run away from the problem, is to face it headlong. And I want to agree, for instance, with Engineer Amadi that we had adopted the shock therapy in order to bring quick results. And I also agree very seriously that we had not managed the anticipation, what we expected to happen. The management was not correctly done. We had hoped that what had happened in the telecom sector will also translate almost directly to the power sector. Meanwhile, they are separate businesses. I want you to understand that power, once generated, must be consumed, and somebody must pay for it once it has been generated. We've been talking about the macroeconomic setting for this particular activity to take place, because the idea was to have an electricity market in which there could be trading between the generators and the distributors, and a lot of trading can go on within the market. The work to bring about this market was eventually not taken very seriously, and macroeconomic situations also compounded the matter. For instance, the projections that were done in MITO were for a foreign exchange that was around 198, I think, at the maximum level, 198 naira to the dollar. It later ballooned to something else. And this particular level of foreign exchange is also, factored into the cost of the product by embed and passed on to the distribution companies. But the distribution companies are not allowed to pass this same effect to the buyers. So liability is building up in terms of, for the distribution company, for a price that they receive but they cannot pass. And therefore, they have to take on these liabilities, and their books begin to look unclean. And that is why they look technically insolvent. Now, when you go to a bank, you want to borrow to meter, you want to borrow to enumerate, you want to borrow to improve on the distribution system, the first thing they will do is they will look at your books. And if the books are in negative, nobody will put his money there. Therefore, the discourse we are put in a situation where they have to collect this power and they have to distribute it and make sure that they pay back the money. Now, the problem is that only a few people are metered. The larger number of people are not metered. You have so many customers. A few customers and so many consumers. The consumers are those who take power without paying. The customers are those who actually take power and pay. And therefore, you have a problem where you sell the product, but you cannot recoup. So there is a mismatch there that is creating a lot of problems. The discourse cannot invest in the network and make sure that money can be recouped. Actually, if the macroeconomic situation had remained in such a way that the initial trajectory that was given to them, it is very possible we will have gotten there. For instance, when NAC raised the tariff towards 2015, most of the discourse were comfortable with the tariff at that time, and things were beginning to take shape. All of a sudden, certain things came on. Fixed charge was removed. which is a significant portion of their revenue. Subsequently, another drop in tariff came up, and it also threw spanner into the whole tariff situation, such that the amount of money they were able to make could not meet their demands. And the former chairman said, again, there were other macroeconomic problems like increase in salaries and inflation. All these eat up into the ability of the tariff to be able to take care of the operational situations of the discourse. That is not to say we are holding brief for the discourse. The discourse are supposed to do the right thing. One, they are supposed to enumerate and know the customers that they have in their network. Mm-hmm. The number of customers, as the number of customers increases, the burden of tariff also reduces. Secondly, they are supposed to meter. And thirdly, they are supposed to make the process of taking power to the consumers as efficient as possible. That is what is encapsulated in the A, T, C, and C loss reduction trajectory. All these were affected by the modeling of the economy through the macroeconomic processes that cause a lot of hiccups in the system. Thank you. Like I was saying, we have a problem. We have to look at these issues and come up with solutions that will make sure that we're able to take care of all these things. And Nigerians should also be willing and be ready to make sure that the solutions that are proffered are allowed to take place. For instance, when there was a minor adjustment in the tariff, some people went to court and stopped it, which will have put us in a better level to make sure that this thing works for the betterment of everybody. I think what we need is to be every stakeholder that has serious issues to deal with in the power sector to be in the same room, maybe a kind of a war room, for us to face these issues squarely and seriously and know what you need to do, what NAC needs to do, what Embed needs to do, what every player needs to do at a point in time, and we work in harmony to get the kind of result.
Yes, Mr. Malo, thank you very much. Perhaps people would kick against tariff increase because they are not seeing the electricity, literally. Let me go to Engineer Shonwumi now. Still talking about this dearth of funding in the sector. Everybody complains about not being paid. The DISCO say they don't have enough money. The TCN will say it gets less than 30% of what it's supposed to get from wheeling electricity in a month. And then, of course, you heard from the Gencos too. What is happening? Because one would have thought that during the privatization process, you mentioned earlier that these things were sold to the ones with the best business plan. One would have thought that these things would have been projected and then should be taken care of at this time.
Okay, let me just say this. First of all, there is only one source of income into the industry, which is the DISCO. But in simple terms, the amount of money that the DISCO collects does not belong to them alone. An aspect of it goes to transmission, an aspect of it goes to generation. However, the amount with which the service is generated, transmitted, and distributed is slightly lower than the amount to which it's sold. So there is a loss in terms of buying and selling. Now, that means that the amount of money the DISCO collects cannot be efficiently distributed around, which means there will be a shortfall somewhere around the place. And that shortfall is what is responsible for certain aspects of the industry being owed. But having said that, the issue will be really how will these things be resolved. When you look at the MITO, that's the multi-year tariff order, which is the basis, it is a calculation framework for computing the price of power. There is a component, or there are a few components of it that are dollar denominated, one of which is the price of gas. Now, the implication of it is this, like the gentleman from BPE said. If you increase the price of power now by 100% or even 1,000%, as soon as there is a fluctuation in the forex price, that price of power no longer becomes cost reflective, and that can happen within a few weeks. Now, when you look at the technical issues for such a thing, first of all, does not make proper business sense for you to do your business to generate your business or produce a product or a service in one currency and to sell in another currency, which means that you are producing a business plan that does not work. And those are regulatory fundamentals, which means it is an imperfection within the regulatory system that allows such an input to still exist. And as long as those inputs exist, there will be, the price, the commercial loss will totally and fully exist. So I'm not saying it's an issue that can be solved overnight. Neither am I saying it's an easy solution, but it's an issue that must have a solution for the industry to move forward. There is that about that. Then there is another issue, the issue about design that was talked about. One of the reasons why the telecom sector was more successful and the power was because, you see, both are utilities. Both of them operate within the electromagnetic spectrum. I'm talking technically now. They use the same signals. The sound signals that come from telecoms and the electricity signals fall within what is called the electromagnetic band. In fact, the transmission can possibly take place within the same medium. That's why you have some electric poles that can also transmit. So there are a number of similarities. But and the two can also be broken down to generation, distribution, and transmission. But the difference, when you take MTN or Globalcom, is that a player is responsible for all the value chain. So the person, the generation signals, which you have with the generating plant for telephone starts with your voice. That's where you generate the signals from. The transmission, basically is about the same thing. And the distribution is what you have in what they call the base station, which is where it determines whether you have credit and all of that. And all those takes place in nanoseconds. But one person is responsible for it. But in power, you don't have one person being responsible for it. What it means is that one person can be inefficient in his own area and transmit the blame to another person. And the general and listening public, who ultimately are the judge, are not able to know the difference because it's a technical industry. So you don't have a case of one person we don't have the case of the buck stopping at one person's table. And those are also fundamental issues. So that's where there can be an issue with respect to the design of it.
So in the power value chain, who is the laggard?
There are imperfections all around. The issue really is not about who is the laggard. The issue is about what's the way forward.
For you to understand the way forward, you must know where the problem lies.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. You see, when you look at generation, there are imperfections within the generation angle. There are perfections within the transmission section, and there are perfections within the distribution section. And we can start going into all the details, but that will not be the issue, the way forward. The way forward will be that every person basically has certain responsibilities. Within the responsibilities and promises that they made at the point of purchase, we need to go back to the basics and say, you made these promises. Which of them can you be held accountable to? If you are not able to be held accountable to it, what are the issues? How can government support you? How can the public support you? And all that. And then one very, very important factor is the issue of communication. The discourse and the regulator, in fact, all stakeholders owe it to the general public to actually communicate with them in a language that they can understand. Yeah. Because the general and listening public are really and truly not in tune with the fundamental, the basic technical issues that are hindering progress in the industry.
Engineer Showome, thank you very much. I don't think the general public or the consumer needs to understand those technical issues. You use your telephone because of your engineering background. You can understand the electromagnetic and all the issues. I don't need to understand all of that.
All we want to see is the light.
Precisely, and I pay for it, and that's why people keep asking the question. How it's like what used to happen in the days of Nitel. Right. Nitel was a telephone company where you had no more than 420,000 landlines in the country. Then you would say, they can't collect revenue. Sometimes they will give you crazy bills, and so on and so forth. And then suddenly the monopoly was broken. You had privatization, and you have over 150 million lines now by that. But here we are. NEPA has been broken down. We have discos. This is one question people keep asking. I'm going to put the question on the table, but I want to go first to Dr. Ogaji in South Africa. If you are in business, it is your duty to ensure that you are able to collect money from your customers. Why are discos reluctant to meter their customers so that they can collect revenue? And then we are making excuses for them. They go to banks, they cannot collect. Which bank are you going to? Commercial bank that is charging 30%? All right, Dr. Ogaji in South Africa, let's bring you in again into this conversation. We know that you deal with Gencos. The face of Gencos has been acknowledged. You are owed, you said, over ₦1 trillion. We do not know for how long more you can continue to extend this credit. But when are we likely to see a crisis from your end? Did you get, well, we can see you blip again. My question, Dr. Ogaji, is that you said earlier that you were being owed at least ₦1 trillion. And in the electricity market, your debtor is NBET, but NBET unfortunately can't recoup the money from the discos. So for how long can the Gencos continue to extend this line of credit before the system crashes?
That's a very good question again, sir. No lawyers will say res ipso loquitur, and it means that the matter speaks for itself. It will not be long because the businessmen, as you know, about 80% of the generation comes through gas, and gas suppliers are all requesting for 100% payment. They are also asking for pay before service. So you can see that going forward, the sustainability of generation is questionable, with a big question mark with red letter. This is because we cannot sustain the market anymore. Since 2013, you have sustained the market for 5 years. I've said this before. If you have a child, 5-year-old child, who has refused to crawl and is still sitting on one position, will you not go and ask either a priest or a native doctor? I think what we need to do, other than this so much specification of this is the problem, this is the problem, from all our discussion, it is so clear that we are lacking some issues. As Dr. Madi clearly identified, he said there is a design problem. So if there is a design problem, we should sit down and redesign the market. For 5 years, we have identified there is a design problem. We sit down and redesign the market. For me, as a Nigerian, the solution I have here is, one, we need collaboration between the private and the public entities, as in the government and the private owners. There is no collaboration. Two, we lack coordination and leadership in the sector. Because if there is no leadership and coordination, how can you find solutions? So first and foremost, we need to put our house in order. The government should put its house in order. The private sector should put their house in order. Then secondly, the other solution before network cuts me off again is for BP and NET to sit down and decide which disco is efficient and phase the discos in phases. The first 4 discos that are efficient should be made to operate on certain conditions with incentives. And then the other discos that are not performing very well should be downgraded and given conditions, CPs, conditions for them to meet before they are upgraded to the efficiency level. If we keep managing failure and saying all of them are discos, most of us, especially in the sector, we are very much aware that not all the discos are efficient. Out of 11 discos, not up to 5 are efficient. Let us tell ourselves the truth and start phasing them. The efficient ones should operate efficiently, and the ones that are not efficient should be downgraded. Then we give them conditions to meet before you upgrade them. How long do we continue with this mass promotion? Everybody must pass to the next class. No. Nigerians need service. Gencos need payment. We need solution to this problem. 5 years is long enough.
All right, Dr. Ogaji, thank you very much. We heard you loud and clear, but even though the video seems slightly distorted. But we heard you loud and clear some of the points that you have raised. Let's also now listen to the comments of Nigerians. We have a number of tweets here that have come in through our Twitter handle. You can see it there on the bottom left-hand corner of the screen at NTA GMN. We just take some of them. Melody Yusuf tweets, thank you for bringing this topic up. And now, for bringing up this topic. Now, the situation in Bauchi State is certainly better, or was certainly better in the PHCN NEPA days. No investment by the discos, not to talk of improvement. Even the customer unit doesn't function. If you have a simple problem after 4 p.m., you are on your own.
Saliu Sheu says, please help me ask your guests why I still get estimated billing. And after I stopped paying the bill as a result of extremely poor supply, I was disconnected for 3 months and for 3 months of disconnection, I'm still being billed.
Festus Akimboyewa, there's no doubt that power infrastructure is capital intensive. And with defective distribution systems such as overhead lines, cables, transformers, meters, and other devices involved in the transmission of service to customers, it will take time before we enjoy electricity.
And Omobayo O says, good morning. We have been complaining to IKEDC, that's Ikeja Distribution Company, forever about our outrageous estimated bills. They come and disconnect for a week, and the estimated bills never reflect that. Prepaid meter will avoid outrageous bills.
Dele Jack Solomon, the gravity of the past crisis and how detrimental it is to our economy is serious. Now, all government parastatals and divisions from defense to trade and oil and gas, even state and local governments, must join hands in carrying out a multifaceted plan that will rectify the situation quickly.
And one of our regulars, Sonny Michael Omakoji, says, let us continue to deceive ourselves in this country. After 5 years of privatization, consumers are still buying transformers, poles, wires, and other accessories needed for power transmission. Now, what has been privatized? Disco and coal have failed woefully, and they should go away.
Dele Jack Solomon again says it is imperative, if Nigeria is to have electricity, that her pipelines must be protected by the most technologically advanced means possible. Now, that's right.
Of war across the country.
Absolutely,
yeah?
And then I mean, Dr. Samamadi will talk about, I mean, it would appear that there's a consensus that something went wrong with the execution of the modeling for the electricity market. So they said, okay, let's go back to the drawing board and see what needs to be done. Who should be the key players in returning to the drawing board? And in this case, what do we need to do between what do we need to do in a relationship between the policy environment and therefore policy makers, the regulators, and then the players? Dr. Samamadi.
Well, good question. I think let me even start with the first guy who mentioned about estimated bill. By the time the last tariff that I signed, people forget, under it I said, if 3 months after the tariff is signed, a customer who has paid for meter has not received it, that customer should no longer pay bills. So that brings an issue. There's an aspect of problem of project management, enforcement, compliance. That's one aspect. So it can give us some improvement, but the problem, there's a big problem of design. Now let's get to who can drive it. Obviously, it is government that owns the sector. The policy maker is the Ministry of Power. But one thing I could recommend now is that at the beginning they had what they called the Presidential Committee on Power, PSCP, which aggregated all the power ministries and agencies, the regulator, the Minister of Power, Finance, and they had a regular meeting. That's important. We also had the President Task Force on Power. He talked about coordination. And there's a point he made about the difference between electricity and telecom. It's what we call, unbundling means that you're going to create coordination problem. One person owns the whole value chain. So but once you unbundle, you need sophisticated coordination. And that's what happens in electricity markets, where the so-called TTCN monitors a value chain that has been disaggregated, and there are different incentive structure. So the lack of sophistication in coordination requires that you have to create a synergy, some kind of top-down approach, where you'll be able to have all the agencies represented and communication flows. Thirdly is that many of the remedies need to be regulatorily mediated. And why I say this is important, there is a cure worse than a disease. If a government comes and pluck from the air a policy,
except HIV.
some cure is worse than the disease. You see, what happens, for example, if government makes a policy, take, for example, the cases going on in Ariaria and Sura, those are dangerous. If you say, oh, they're not performing, and you come and cherry pick their network, they can go to court and tie it down, because, by the way, you need a hearing process for the regulator to say, look, this is a benchmark. Like I said, this is the benchmark. Now, we give you, show us how you perform. Then if they fail, the regulator can, in a quasi-judicial way, that's why it's like a court, they use their network and say, look, your license is modified because it can't deliver this service. And that's what August said. I've been saying that. I said, after, in 2013, we left to 2015, 2 years after the privatization. Now, after 3 years, 5 years more, it's the right time to sit back and do a re-evaluation of the discourse. The discourse is easy to generate without meaning offense to Ogazi. So the fact that you guys are meeting a benchmark, the design of this market is built on the discourse capacity to incent efficiency up, bottom up. If the discourse fails, it has failed. So what that therefore means is that the regulator should be allowed to craft milestones and benchmarks and reassess performance and take out those who cannot perform, either through a competitive process, not through backyard administrative fiat. Competitive process, get new players. That's number one. Two, there are certain low-hanging fruits, like metering, for example. People are talking about metering, estimated billing. By the time we left, we are closing down to the contract market. We said, you must, all of you must sign up your contracts and start performing like a real market. Now, we have, in my view, gone back because most of the discos are not able to perform. So what I think is first and foremost is that create that structure where all the agencies interface regularly, because this is a problem-solving solution. Two, be bold enough to, instead of making interventions that are going to give us small, short-term, go into a holistic review of the design of the market in 3 ways. One is fine. Should we privatize all? Secondly, methodology. Third is performance-based. Now, since these people, for example, there's certain things they can't do. Somebody says, okay, these companies cannot perform some of this contract because they don't have the liquidity. They're supposed to come with their own asset. They borrowed 100%. So after borrowing 100% to acquire a product, which bank will give you money to finance recovery of losses? So
Dr.
that's
Amadi,
really a big problem.
Your final thoughts, Mr. Malu, on this issue of going forward. Nigeria, according to the world standard, needs about 160,000 megawatts of electricity. We're generating about 7,000. We can't even distribute 3,000. Industrialization, even the state of life of human beings, of Nigerians, depends on electricity. How do we go forward from talking?
Let me just step back a little, and I will come to that question. Colombia had a worse scenario than what we have. They were able to come out of it through, like the doctor said, a coordinated approach. They had issues of militancy that their distribution companies could not even collect money from consumers. They were able to handle them. And it is doable here.
How is it
now, that is where I'm going to.
How was Colombia able to do that? Very briefly.
Colombia came up with schemes that were able to draw in the consumer into what was happening. They saw that they could get obtain value from what was being put on the table, and they bought into it. That is what we need to do. And in order to achieve that, the power sector reform program had also been packaged through the PSRP, that is the Power Sector Reform Program that was anchored by the World Bank, in order to make sure that all these issues are taken care of. Assignments were given to each agency of government what they need to do.
But they have failed.
But the problem is, again, we are back to it, coordination. That was why I said there is a need for us to go back to that war room situation and have everybody that matters to really look at the issue. What are you supposed to do? What am I supposed to do? And we do it in a coordinated form that will enable us attend that program. It also involves a situation where there will be a reset for all the key players so that the contract system can play into the market. And then you will be held responsible after the reset if it is properly done.
All right. Yunana Malo, of course, thanks a lot. We appreciate all our guests this morning. We are pressed for time. If you were to extend this conversation for another 1 hour, we'll still be in the studios, but we only have just a few minutes left for the entire program, and we have our complimentary segments. We'd like to thank Dr. Joy Ogaji, who is the Executive Secretary of the Association of Power Generation Companies. He joined us via Skype. Thanks a lot for being around with us. We do hope that you have a safe trip back. Dr. Ogaji.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure being part of the program.
Thank you. Engineer Olabode Showumi, who is a consultant to the House of Representatives Committee on Power. Thanks a lot for being on Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you.
Our appreciation also to Yunana Malo, Director of Energy Bureau of Public Enterprises, that supervised the privatization of the electricity companies.
Thank you very much.
All right. And last but not the least, Dr. Sam Amadi, former chairman of the Electricity Regulatory Commission and now teaches law at Bayes University here in Abuja. Dr. Amadi, thanks a lot for being around.
Thank you.
Okay, so let's go over now to our sports desk.